Our next speaker for today, we have Neelan Choksi, President and COO from Tasktop Technologies. Neelan oversees corporate development, customer success, and marketing at Tasktop. Neelan has extensive technology management experience and recently served as the COO of Lexicycle, the company behind Stanza, which became the most popular ebook reader from the Apple iPhone and iPod Touch. He also served as COO of SpringSource, which was acquired by VMware in 2009. Prior to that, Neelan served as co-founder and president of Solar Metric. Neelan has also worked for Anderson Consulting Strategic Services and Exxon Research and Engineering. His session for today is Beyond DevOps, Measuring Flow of Business Value in Software.
This talk is going to give you some insight on how to identify, measure, learning to see, and improve the flow of value in software delivery. I'm Neelan. I'm excited to have the opportunity to present to you. Hopefully, by the end of the talk, I've provided some practical lessons that I've garnered from our teams at Tasktop, as well as our experts like Carmen Diardo, Dominica DeGrandis, Dr. McKirsten, and my colleague, Brian Ashcraft, who I owe a debt of gratitude for helping me with this presentation. So my background includes being part of the Value Stream Management Consortium, DevOps Institute Ambassador, which I think uniquely gives me a position to talk about this topic. So John Smart presented this image a few years back at DevOps Enterprise Summit, and I felt that this was the perfect lead-in to this talk. We've all implemented Agile in our teams. We've automated our release processes. But if the PMO, budgeting, or other activities take months, quarters, or years, does it really matter that we're Agile or that we can release software 57 times a day? No, we need something more than DevOps and Agile to ensure that customers get what they're looking for in a timely manner. And value stream management is starting to emerge as the thing that augments what you've done with Agile and what you've done with automating CI/CD to really drive customer value. Value stream management is the latest emerging transformational discipline that is helping organizations better manage their software delivery. Value stream management is a management technique or practice that focuses on increasing the flow of business value from customer request to customer delivery. Its systematic approach to measuring and improving flow helps organizations shorten time to market, increase throughput, improve product quality, and optimize for business outcomes. So the key points are that the customer is at the center, it's end-to-end, it's about data, and it's making data-driven decisions. It's about making work visible and allows IT to partner with the business. It is not value stream mapping. Unfortunately, obviously, the same acronym VSM is used for both. Many of the inspirations for value stream management in software come from Dr. McKirsten's book, from Forrester Research's Chris Kondo's work, and numerous other analysts' work about VSM, and applying lean principles that we learned from manufacturing to the software delivery industry. So let's dive in. So let's start with learning to see. One of the really interesting things about value is that it rarely correlates neatly to one specific change. So when we want to measure value, I'll typically ask an audience, if I'm in person, what kind of ways have they experienced measuring value in software delivery? And you'll get all kinds of answers: number of deploys, story points, burn downs, burn ups, customer surveys. The problem with value, it's really hard to quantify, and it rarely correlates neatly to one specific thing. It appears in numerous places and means different things to different people and is accounted for differently depending on who you are. In a physical plant, like an automotive plant, you can sit in the rafters and you can see what flows. You can see that the chassis is being built. You can see that brakes are being added. A steering column is being installed. How do you do the same thing in software delivery, where value creation is intangible? You start with identifying what flows in software delivery. When we think about what flows in software delivery, we think about features, risks, defects, and debts. Features are essentially new capabilities that are contributing to new business value, even revenue generation. The representing work packages are typically stories, epics, features. Defects are work that goes into addressing quality, whether those defects are identified in testing or whether identified by a customer. These are things like issues, bugs, incidents, tickets. Risk is really security is kind of, when we say risk, we're talking about more security type risks. It's work that protects the product and the business from vulnerabilities. Some examples are security, compliance, vulnerabilities. Finally, debt, technical debt is obviously the one that most people think about, but there's other types of debt as well, is essentially work that keeps the product value stream from being able to deliver new value units. So some examples of this can be spikes, they can be legacy issues, they can be quick things you've done to allow delivery of something for a customer in the past. But at the end of the day, the goal here is that we want visibility into the mixture of work. And we also want to control and tune the flow in the spirit of a healthy and optimal value stream. The great thing about features, risks, defects, and debt are they're mutually exclusive and comprehensively exhaustive, MECE, which essentially means that these are the ways that value is delivered in software delivery. These are the four things that if you can classify everything into four buckets, these are the four buckets. Taking this classification a step further, we begin to categorize things into things that the business understands. Value generation, i.e. revenue in many cases, and value protection. Let's not have things that cause problems that cause us to lose value. So features obviously are very, generally prioritized as inherently more important than the other flow items. People over-focus a lot on features, which makes sense, right? Those are the things that customers are requesting. Those are the things that customers want. But the problem is that if that's all you focus on, you end up having a messy and suboptimal mixture of delivering value. So we'll talk about this a little bit later, but a much better approach is a disciplined approach to work type distribution, which shows the mixture of work being done and also shows what is being neglected. So in value protection, you often see risk, you often see defects addressed. Technical debt seems to appear on both sides. Sometimes you'll see it in value generation, sometimes you'll see it in value protection. But ultimately, what we want is visibility into the type of work getting done and what work is being neglected so that we become more knowledgeable and more intentful about having a healthy and sustainable product value stream and the mixture of type of work that gets done. So again, what we're talking about is taking the work that's already being done and abstracting it into buckets that can be compared, that can be looked at. Abstraction is a critical piece of making measurement happen. You need some sort of mapping entity so that you bring some structure to the noise. Without abstraction, you're just going to be able to optimize locally and not globally. For example, a team can understand how to improve, but not the entire organization. Abstraction is also key, not just in meaningful metrics, but then making portfolio decisions based on those metrics. So it's one of the important aspects that will keep coming up. It came up as we abstracted things into the flow items. It comes up as we abstracted things into value creation and value protection. Again, if I was in person, what I would do is sit down with you. But since this is a recording, I'm going to ask you to maybe pause the screen and do this as an exercise. But get a piece of paper, take each of these items, epics, issues, features, all of the items in the black, and try and draw lines if you have a screen, or try and write, is an epic, do you think an epic is a feature? Do you think a task in Jira would fall into a feature bucket, or would it fall into a defect bucket? A bug's probably pretty obvious, but a bug from, say, Micro Focus Quality Center or Tricentis would probably fall into a defect bucket. But try and take these items and map them to the flow items of feature, defect, and risk. Take a minute, pause the screen, and then when you're ready and you've done this, come back and we'll kind of go into what the answers are. So feature-related work, epic, feature, story, maybe sometimes a request could potentially be a feature. Obviously, a request could also be defect or a risk item. So somewhere along the way, it's not always a one-for-one mapping. In a lot of our customer engagements, we'll see that we have to look a little bit deeper. We have to look for some way of taking a request that comes from a customer out of your ITSM system, and based on some additional information, bucket it into a defect, bucket it into a request, risk, or bucket it into a feature. So you want to have some flexibility as you're doing your mapping and doing your abstractions to be able to allow for things like that. Defect, you'll typically see an issue, a bug, a ticket as being typically classified as a defect. Risk, security, vulnerability, compliance, typically the things that fall into a risk category. And then on debt, code refactor, experiment sometimes can fall into a debt category. But essentially, what we've done here is this exercise helps us identify what are the value work packages that we want to track and measure into a value flow perspective. And then this is the abstraction exercise that takes place so that we can visualize the key business value in our metrics. All right, moving on to learning how to improve. In order to improve, we have to be able to measure. So let's start with some key metrics we can use to measure value flow. VSM is a continuous improvement program. We can't improve what we can't measure. We talked about that, what we will measure. Now, how do we measure that? We're going to measure the flow of those value creation units with some flow-centric metrics. Flow time provides insight into how long does it take for a feature or a defect or a work of technical debt to get through the value stream, all the way from ideation, all the way to delivery to customer. It's not just good enough that the developer pulled it off the backlog and has worked on it and completed it. It has to be from customer request to customer delivery. Adrian Cockcroft of AWS wrote in Cloud for CIOs that if you're going to measure one metric, flow time is the one metric to measure. If you get that to improve, it likely means that you're improving a whole lot of other things and doing a whole lot of things right. Flow efficiency is how much wait time was there in a defect or in a feature delivery. So it takes the active time and the waiting times and takes a look at it and gives you a percentage of total time. So what we've seen with our global 5,000 companies that we work with is that typical flow efficiencies are in the single digit percentages. What that means is there is 10 to 20x more wait time than active times. The good news is there's great amounts to improve there. Flow efficiency is the input you need to help to start to identify where your bottlenecks are. And then, of course, you find your bottleneck, you do something about that bottleneck. You try to identify the biggest bottleneck causing the biggest wait times. This is one of the quickest ways to improve delivery to a customer. Flow distribution, which we're going to go into a lot more detail, but it's the distribution between defects, features, risk, and technical debt. How much time are we spending on each of the flow items? What is the balance of value generation versus value protection work? What work is getting prioritized and what work is not getting attention? I won't go into too much detail here, but there's a couple other flow metrics that I'm not covering because of time constraints. Flow load and flow velocity. You'll see some links at the end of this presentation where you can learn more about those metrics as well. So I'm going to dive into flow distribution as an example and go into detail, but we can do this with each of the flow metrics. A pretty common scenario is the business has said, we've got to do a push to market for XYZ customer. We need all of these features delivered. So what typically happens in that scenario is feature work gets prioritized at the cost of technical debt. So as all the work is all and all the attention is going to feature work, technical debt increases. Well, what almost always happens in that scenario as you're increasing technical debt is quality goes down. And we've all been through this in our organizations at various points in time. When quality decreases, the number of defects that customers report, the number of defects that are identified in your testing start to increase. And this formula is a recipe for obviously slowing down feature work. So what you start to see is as defects increase, your ability to deliver features goes down. It's a zero-sum game. So the more defects that you're addressing, the less feature work that you can do in the future. John Cutler gives a great example from Twitter about this exact thing. In 2015, a reference feature took 15 to 30 days. In 2018, the same exact type of feature took 150 to 300 days. The reason he gives for that is technical debt has increased, and then these fast track push to market silver bullets that drive success in customer acquisition has resulted in less time to do the other activities, less time to do technical debt work, which then creates a challenge in that more and more defects start appearing, more and more time goes to defects, less feature work happens, and all of a sudden everything grinds to a halt. So what can we do about it? Let's look at some real world examples. About a year and a half ago, Zoom ran into this problem. The CEO of Zoom announced that they were going to 100% focus on risk and security. Had they not done that, and had they had a big black eye from a security issue, would Zoom be the company it is today? Would Zoom have the usage that it is today? Would I be recording on Zoom today, right now for this presentation? Probably not. That Zoom situation actually reminded me also of Bill Gates and the SQL Slammer issue from 2003 that Microsoft dealt with. Bill Gates came out with the trustworthy computing memo at that time and announced that Microsoft would stop all feature work and focus solely on technical debt. So what does that look like when someone does that? Feature work grinds to a halt. Technical debt is what's being now focused on. So the debts and the risks start to go down. As the debts and risks start to go down, quality improves. You can start to do a little bit less technical debt work and you can start to restart doing your feature work. That's as much as what I showed previously was the vicious cycle, this is the virtuous cycle of making sure that if you can find that balance of debt, feature, risk, and defect work, there is an optimal solution for your organization, for your product value stream. I'm not saying that if you do this, every software company will turn into the largest software company in the world like Microsoft did, but you have to find a way out of that vicious cycle. Otherwise, you have no chance. So we've talked about identifying and classifying work packages that constitute value in software delivery. We talked about why abstraction is important. We've talked about that VSM should be a continuous improvement program, and we can't improve what we can't measure. We've talked about how do we measure and what do we measure. We have to set goals and set some targets and see how we're doing against those targets. Another example around flow efficiency is, this may be a little bit of an American thing, but there's a game, it's a big board, it's called whack-a-mole. And essentially this mole pops up and you have a hammer and you hit the mole and the mole drops back down. And then somewhere else, another mole pops up. You hit the mole and it drops down. This is literally what flow efficiency does. It shows you your efficiency. In this example, what you see on the screen, 17% is actually pretty decent. But essentially, you're trying to find the biggest bottleneck, the biggest places where you have wait times, fix it, rebaseline your metrics, find the next biggest bottleneck, fix that, rebaseline. The route to 50% increased throughput or improved flow efficiency is often made up of 30 or 40 fixes to your biggest bottlenecks. And that is how you get to significant improvement in your organization. So in summary, learning to see is to help identify what flows in software delivery and classifying it. Learning to improve is measuring the value flow, improving baselining, and then improving your metrics. And then what we've seen that's super, super important is to have a goal to improve. Many organizations that we work with, or we're starting to see, have set aside OKRs at the company level to improve flow efficiency 5 or 10% every quarter or every year as a company goal. And by keeping that front and center, that's how you also improve. This is how value stream management begins. And this is how you too can implement the ideas behind value stream management and help your organizations improve. So to continue the conversation, you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. You can learn more details about this at tasktop.com/value stream management, project2product.org, or flowframework.org. Thanks for your time. We appreciate you thinking about how to improve software. We think there's great opportunity to do so. And we look forward to continuing this conversation about value stream management and learning to help your organizations be the most successful they can be in the age of software. Thank you.